You are listening to the Cattle Call podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zentech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The Cattle Call podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cattle Call podcast with Jim and Rocco from Zentech Consultants. I am Jim, your extraordinarily loud and goofy host, and with me, as always, is my partner,
Rocco.
See, Rocco, the guy who gives me absolutely nothing in my intros, which is why he makes you all suffer through, yes, you all hate it, the engineering joke of the week. We even have a guest on today, Rocco, and you're going to make him listen to this terrible joke. This is all on him, David. This isn't me. So here we go. You ready? Engineering joke of the week, which is great this week because it was actually, I've been listening to this joke since I was like 4 years old. It was my father's favorite joke of all time. He told this all the time. So a poor farmer sent his son to college to become an engineer. Right? And when the son graduated, the farmer asked him to say one thing, just one thing that he had learned at that fancy college. And the son thought for a moment. He goes, I guess pi r square? And the farmer just looks at him and goes, boy, you didn't learn nothing. Pi r round, cornbread r square. But I'm fine. That may be the worst joke ever told. Oh, God. See what you make the people suffer through, Rocco. All right, so.
It's all my fault.
It is. It's always your fault. All right, folks. So today we're talking about BricsCAD for the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, or what we generally call the MEP world. And to kind of help us wrap our brains around the topic, we have a first-time guest on the show today. David Robison, who is the president of Design Master Software, is here with us today on the show. So, David, thank you so much for being on the podcast, sir.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm excited.
You say that now. Wait till we're done. But yeah, we do appreciate you taking out the time. This should be a good conversation. So, but look, as always, right? Whenever we have a guest on the show, we like to give them a chance to kind of intro themselves to our listeners and give a little bit of their background so folks can hear what a brilliant guest they actually are. So David, why don't you give folks a little brief history of how you got to where you are over at Design Master?
Yeah, so I have been working in the MEP industry since the mid-90s. My dad was an electrical engineer, and he had an engineering firm. And so in the mid-90s, we actually started working together doing AutoCAD customization for his firm, essentially writing electrical and mechanical software on top of AutoCAD at the time. In 2001, we took that public to other engineering firms. So we've been selling software now since 2001, first on top of AutoCAD. And then in 2008, BricsCAD came on my radar as an alternative we could support. And we started supporting them in about 2011 once we had everything put together. And then more recently, we've also got stuff running in Revit for the electrical side. But I've been doing MEP software, customizing AutoCAD, pretty much my entire life through my dad and then through my company now.
It's a nice thing, right? We all get hooked into it and we kind of never find our way back out. Particularly back, like you said, we were talking before the show, Dave and I, we've both been doing this for about as long as each other. All right, so as you guys can hear, right, David's got a real extensive background in the technical BIM environment, right, and developing software solutions to work inside the major CAD systems. So I think he's the perfect guy to talk about a topic that I think a lot of people just don't really think about, right? And that's really using systems other than the big name Autodesk products for building information modeling, right? And he knows what the positive and negatives are for those systems, right? Particularly, I think, when we get into those MEP spaces. All right, so David, let's start simple. Can you actually use BricsCAD for building information modeling?
So there's a lot to unpack with that question. Even that question is not simple. So again, I go back to 2001 when BIM was essentially created as a marketing term by Autodesk to sell essentially Revit. So you have to even figure out what is meant by BIM when someone's asking for it. Because sometimes when they say BIM, what they say is, I need a Revit deliverable. And in that case, you're like, well, obviously I'm using Revit. But
I had that happen just about an hour ago in a conversation.
Yep. It's a very common thing.
Because they say BIM, but what they mean is Revit. And obviously, if that's the case, you're using Revit, and that's where you are. But a lot of buildings don't need to be done in Revit. That there's a whole host of buildings. You're doing a strip mall. You're doing a gas station, and Revit maybe is overkill for that. And so that is where something like BricsCAD can come in, but you still want to have something a little bit more intelligent than just lines and circles that we were drafting 30 years ago. So you have the opportunity to have BIM, but it needs to be BIM for MEP engineers rather than the architectural BIM that generally gets thrown out when people are thinking about this.
Yeah. No, and that's really kind of where I want to focus on today, right? It's like you say, BricsCAD BIM. It's a great tool, right? It's a little separate package from BricsCAD that you can get, and I've used it quite a bit for the architectural design of BIM models, right? I even teach a few classes on that, but I have never really done all that much work with it on the MEP side of the house. And I know that there are a lot of built-in tools and components for those industries, but in BricsCAD, I've kind of always viewed them as just rough layout tools, right? Not really meant for designing in the BIM space. And I think there's a need to have add-on packages for BricsCAD BIM to do full-scale MEP design, but it could be, as Rocco will tell you, that I can be wrong. It happens, at least 15 times an hour. And that's why we have David here to tell me whether or not I'm just an idiot. So David, what does MEP need from BIM, and does BricsCAD provide that kind of out of the box?
Yeah, so MEP, typically when you're thinking BIM, it's always driven by the architect. So they want this fancy 3D model. And MEP doesn't need that so much. On the mechanical side, the ductwork has some 3D-ness to it. So obviously there's value in some 3D modeling there. But you also need kind of the design components. You need to figure out how big is that duct going to be. There's some calculations there. And then on the electrical side, you mentioned 3D to an electrical engineer, and their eyes roll into the back of their heads because that's the last thing they care about.
Yeah. Who needs to see a 3D 14 gauge wire? It doesn't really do much for you.
It's like, my conduit is going to work. I'm concerned about things like fault coordination and voltage drop, which are all the calculations the electrical engineer has to do. So they need to have that stuff in BIM. So out of the box, BricsCAD's not going to have that. You really need something layered on top of it, and that's what our software does. I know that there's a couple other options on the HVAC plumbing side. There's really not a whole lot on the electrical side because you very quickly are moving away from really CAD to like electrical design that you're having to put on top.
Yeah, I'm sure it certainly helps having your dad as an electrical engineer to work with, right? That's a definite plus. Always helps. So
yeah.
All right, so that's a fair statement, yeah, and you guys should definitely, and Dave, make sure you hit you push your website here before we're done for the day, so they can go see what you got there. So Rocco, do you have, when you're talking to folks, do you have a lot of clients who are kind of looking for help or training or tools like David has in getting BricsCAD working as their primary MEP design tool?
It does come up. BricsCAD is a great foundational 2D and 3D, DWG based CAD platform, right? And it's certainly a healthy alternative, to Autodesk in a lot of ways, but it doesn't offer the MEP components, and the folks at Bricks will be honest and tell you that, so that's why there's great guys like Dave out there who do what they're doing, and who put out great tools that integrate right from within BricsCAD.
Okay, so look, like I was saying before, my own background in the design world was, early on it was pure architecture, and then later on I moved into the civil space, right? So I have not had a lot of direct experience working up MEP BIM models. I'm a pretty good hand at developing, building BIMs, right, to a given level of development, that the client needs, and helping them set up standards to reach those goals themselves. But I am no expert on what the MEP system requirements might be in the BIM space, right? So, David, how does MEP work differ from architectural work inside of a BIM environment?
So they really have just additional models that end up being handled separately. Like on the electrical side, this is a lot more clear. You have your 3D model, which they, again, are rolling their eyes at, but you've got your layout of your devices. So that kind of happens all in some sort of BIM CAD environment. But you also have what's called a single line diagram. That's where you're laying out your panels, you're connecting them diagrammatically. It's more logical connections. And that's some drafting. And you want that linked to your floor plans, but it's not. So it's kind of the separate piece. Then you also have your calculations, which again are a separate piece. They're often Excel or some other third-party industry tool that exists for doing electrical calculations. So an electrical engineer hears BIM and they think, oh, I can bring all that together. And the reality is that any of the BIM packages out there generally don't. You've got just the drafting package for the floor plans, but they don't do anything for the single line. They're not doing anything for the calculations. So all the cool stuff you could do with BIM is just kind of ignored on the electrical side. And tying this into our software, this is where we then come in as someone focused very much on the MEP niche and putting together a package that has all of that in there. It has all of that drafting stuff that you need, and then has the calculations behind it as well, pulling that in so that it's one model, achieving that goal of the single building model. It's a single model, but so that one model in your package, and our software can run on top of BricsCAD. So you can have this whole model in BricsCAD with all of your calculations. You're not having to step out to Excel. The single line you're creating in BricsCAD is linked with the floor plan you're creating in BricsCAD. So that's the benefit of something like our software, and that's what you really need to do BIM on the MEP side.
Nice. And while I'm thinking about it, before I get, tell everybody what your website is and where they can go learn about your software.
We should mention that. It is designmaster.biz, B-I-Z. And you can find all of our software there. We have free trials. You can get downloads and try them out. They run on top of BricsCAD, and you can see what the software does and if it's going to be a good fit for your workflow.
Perfect. All right. So I tell you what, let's take a quick break here to let our sponsor get a word in. And when we get back, I want to talk a bit more about the BricsCAD tools and processes for BIM in the MEP space. All right, so stand by, folks. We'll be back just a minute with more of the Cattle Call Podcast.
Hey everybody, this is Jim and Rocco with ZenTech Consultants, and we wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the training options that we have available here for you guys at ZenTech Consultants. We offer public training classes as well as private custom courses for all of your software and design needs. So, Rocco, why don't you tell the folks what kind of training we offer and how do they reach out to us to get it going for them?
Yeah, Jim, we cover everything from Bluebeam to Autodesk to Microsoft to BricsCAD to civil site design training and beginner through to advanced level topics. Like you said, both public and private courses. If you got a group and want to run a class specifically for your team, we can help you. So just feel free to hit our website. We're at zentechconsultants.net. That's ZENTEK, or you can give us a ring, 866-824-4459, or even drop us an email, sales@zentechconsultants.net.
There you go, ZenTech Consultants for all of your technology training needs.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Cattle Call Podcast. We're talking with David Robison of Design Master Software today about MEP BIM work in general, and how that can be handled using BricsCAD in particular. So look, BIM, we touched on this in the first half. BIM has a reputation of being an architectural tool, right? Mainly because so many architects led that BIM charge when Revit first hit the scene, and they still kind of have the mindset of Revit and BIM being together. But I think that the MEP industries are huge beneficiaries of the BIM process, and that they're really just starting to implement BIM as a standard work function, and that they do need help from folks like David to make that happen. So, David, what do you think are the kind of the primary benefits of BIM for MEP design and engineering?
So you kind of have to separate BIM out into two pieces, I think, to think about this. There's the 3D stuff that all the architects are doing. So at one level, the MEP needs to be able to participate in the 3D modeling and coordination. So you need something that can get you that 3D model so you can show up at a coordination meeting and actually do the coordination. But then there's the other part of BIM that's just where you're really just using it for your design work. And that's where it can also be adding value to the engineers, where it's helping them do the design. Again, not just a drafting tool, but actually a design tool where they're doing their engineering calculations together with the drafting. So it's all one piece, not multiple pieces having to pull it all together.
Okay. Yeah, that's a definite distinct difference between those two. So that's a good summary of that. So, look, on my side, BricsCAD is my preferred 2D CAD system, right? And it's absolutely amazing when it comes to modeling buildings with really just one of the simplest interfaces I've ever seen. And I pointed out at the top of the show that I haven't done a lot of MEP work in BricsCAD myself, so I'm a bit sketchy on what it can and can't do in those areas. Luckily, David knows more than I do on this topic, and like you said, there are the design side tools definitely aren't there. But in terms of MEP, what if any native tools do exist in BricsCAD itself to help our listeners implement BIM for the MEP space, David?
So I don't know what BricsCAD has by itself, and I think BricsCAD would agree with this, is that you really need to layer something else on top for MEP. If you go to the ductwork side, there's a fair number of options out there. The ductwork is a little bit more of a crowded space, so that you might find a tool other than my software on the ductwork side. On the electrical side, there's not as much going on, so it's really kind of design mastering. There's not a whole lot of other people trying to address that, because the drafting portion is just a very small portion of what's happening. You're really getting into the calculation portion at that point. And that's where we have a lot of industry knowledge and are adding value and know how to do that someone just coming at it from a drafting standpoint isn't going to understand. But just about itself, BricsCAD can be a great drafting tool for getting your stuff out there, but you really need a third-party add-on to really be able to do any sort of BIM.
Okay, yeah, and I would agree. That's kind of been my experience too. That even things for like ductwork and conduits and so on, it's really just running basically 3D polylines and then extruding them out to get those rough coordination models is all I've really seen in the BricsCAD itself, in the BricsCAD BIM. So Rocco, what about from your side? Do you see or know of any clients who are using BricsCAD BIM built-in tools for MEP? Or, like Dave was saying, are they usually having or looking for an add-on system to kind of improve that workflow?
No, it's that add-on, like I was saying before. I mean, for pure architecture, BricsCAD BIM is perfect, but if you need to get into these other areas, it's, and I've been on demos with folks at Brixis, who they'll tell you flat out, right, this is how far we can take it. Now you need to look at at a tool like Design Master to supplement, where BricsCAD doesn't cut it. So, that's what I see.
Okay, fair enough. So look, at the end of the day, the MEP work, it has to be communicated and shared, right, with the architects and all the other designers on your project. Interoperability and communication of the BIM design it's always a key feature. I think we are long past the days when being able to operate in an engineering silo and just print out a set of paper plans when your part of the job is done. It's not going to work, right? That's long gone. And modern design is always a collaborative process, and I think it just keeps becoming more and more like that as certain concepts are really starting to sink in, right? The idea of integrated project delivery, where engineers, architects, owners, and GCs are working together on the job and the design, right? And more the private public partnerships that you get from government work are becoming more and more of the norm. So, David, how do, BricsCAD, MEP, BIM tools, and your tools allow engineers to kind of collaborate between, disciplines and project stakeholders that are, maybe using other programs or other systems?
You say we're past printing out paper. At this point, we print out PDFs and then we pass those around. But a lot of the workflows, I feel like, are the same. But with the collaboration, you have the 3D coordination checks that exist now. So you need to be able to create a 3D model. And like our software, we can create a 3D model either as a DWG or an IFC. And then you always are taking that to something else. Usually Navisworks really is where you're going. You pull all the models together. So you just need to be able to participate in something like that for your collision detection. The other thing you can look for that the MEP really benefits from in BIM is that it lets you get started on your design sooner. There's kind of this idea that, okay, we're in the early stages, so we're not going to do very much, and then we're not going to show, we might do like single line diagram or single line ductwork to begin with, and then maybe we'll do double line later. If you have a good tool where the drafting is handled for you, you can show up at the first meeting with a completely done 2D, double line or even a 3D model of your ductwork, and then you can actually have more interesting conversations with people early in the design so that you can, make changes before things are starting to get set in stone. So a good BIM tool allows you to move a lot of that design work up front so that you can iterate over the course of the design and keep up with the changes that are happening.
Okay. And just on kind of an aside question, just to kind of follow up on that with your software in particular, because you're right. There's still a lot of we print to PDF, and that's what the GC gets, and that's life. But on the design side, does your software have any kind of functionality or capability to kind of integrate, through data transfer, right, from like your software to Excel to Power BI to a project management system back to the design? Is there any kind of interoperability that you guys are dealing with or working on?
We don't really do anything with that because largely the stuff that we're doing, taking the obvious example like exporting to IFC is not built out well enough on the mechanical or electrical side to really take any information, and then doesn't really have anywhere for it to go. So there's not a whole lot of need for any interoperability of that stuff. So anything, you can move your drawing files in there to be sharing them and whatnot, which is essentially what people do. But on the design side, there's really nothing to be shared with anyone else, partly because no one else can take it, partly the engineers generally don't like to share it with anybody else. So we don't have any integrations, and it hasn't been something that people need because they really just need the coordination models, and that's kind of it.
Okay, and that's fair. Like I said, MEP, not really my space. So I was just kind of wondering what the requirements were there. All right, so I tell you what, whenever we have a guest on the show, I always like to give them a chance to tell us something about their area of expertise that I wasn't smart enough to know I should ask about. So I'm going to give David the last call here today, and let him help educate all of us. So David, what else would you like to tell people about the MEP BIM space that I didn't get around to asking you today?
I think your question's pretty well covered it. So I just want to reiterate what I kind of said at the top of the show, which is that when you're thinking about BIM, it's really two things. Do you need a Revit deliverable? And obviously you need Revit, or do you not? And if you don't, then there are tools out there that are not Revit that can be helpful and that you can get an affordable solution running on BricsCAD. It doesn't even have to be AutoCAD. And you can have software that's as functional, even more functional than what Revit can do on the MEP side. So it can be useful for your firm internally beyond just doing drafting in Excel spreadsheets that we've been doing for 20 years, that there is actually a BIM workflow that's not Revit, that's also not Excel spreadsheets.
There you go. Fair point. All right. So I tell you what, let's wrap it up there. But before we go, I just want to thank David once more for being here. Dave, we really appreciate you taking the time, to talk to us. And now we'll ask you, are you sure you want to come back again in the future now that you've actually been here with us?
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I'd be happy to come back another time.
Oh, another glutton for punishment. Some people never learn, Rocco.
No.
But I'm glad. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a show. All right, David, thanks again, sir. We appreciate it. All right, everybody, we're going to bounce out of here. We will catch you next time on the Cattle Call Podcast.
All right, everybody, today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net, or you can even call us 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from you all.